Have you ever walked into a room and felt your entire body pause before your mind even knew why, like something just entered, quietly, but your soul turned its face toward it? That's not attraction, that's remembrance. Some encounters need no words, no charm, no effort to impress. It's something else entirely. A glance, a stillness, a subtle shift in the air, and suddenly a man feels something stir inside him, like a part of him long asleep just woke up. But here's the secret. It's not about what she looks like. It's not about how she speaks. It's not even about how much attention she gets. It's her energy, quiet, unmistakable, undeniable. It's a frequency, a deep vibration from a woman who no longer needs to be chosen because she's already chosen herself. And that changes everything. Carl Jung called it anima, the feminine essence buried deep in the unconscious of every man. It's not a fantasy, not a stereotype, not the ideal woman we see in magazines. It's a blueprint, a spiritual code, a deep reservoir of feeling, intuition, and soul that most men were taught to silence. But when he meets a woman who's fully herself, not performing, not pleasing, not proving anything, something ancient stirs in him, not because she fits his list, but because she mirrors a part of him he didn't even know he was missing. She doesn't seduce, she reminds. And in that reminder, he feels something profoundly real. Let's be honest. We live in a world obsessed with performance, with filters, with perfect lines and perfectly timed charm. But none of that creates real resonance, because the soul doesn't respond to strategy. It responds to truth. That's why a man may pass dozens of beautiful women and forget their faces. But then there's her, the one who wasn't trying to be seen, the one who simply was. Still, grounded, unbothered, but unforgettable. Why? Because presence is louder than performance. Because her being, her energy, speaks a language his soul understands without needing translation. She's not the loudest in the room. She doesn't compete. She doesn't try to say the right things or act the right way. She has nothing to prove, because she no longer lives from lack. And that's exactly why she becomes magnetic. Her stillness is not silence, it's power. Her gentleness isn't weakness. It's the wisdom of a woman who's made peace with herself. And in that peace, she emits a signal. She doesn't chase. She calls. She doesn't pull. She invites. And her energy, it doesn't beg to be seen. It knows it will be felt. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever stood next to someone who didn't say much, but their very presence pulled you inward? Or maybe you've been that woman before, but forgot what it feels like to live that way. So here's a gentle invitation. What if you stopped trying to be seen and started seeing yourself again? What if your power wasn't in being perfect, but in simply being present? What if the very thing you've been chasing, love, attention, validation, was inside you all along, just waiting for you to come home? Because the truth is, you don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You only need to remember who you were before the world told you you had to become someone else. And once you do, once you begin to live from that quiet, aligned truth, the right people will find you. Not because you asked, but because your energy whispered, "I am here." So if something inside you stirred while listening to this, don't scroll away just yet. Leave a comment. Who are you when you no longer need to be chosen? And if you're ready to walk the path of awakening, healing, and magnetic wholeness, subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. The woman you're becoming. She's already waiting. Have you ever felt someone's presence before they said a single word, like they walked into the room, and something in the air shifted, subtly, deeply, undeniably? You couldn't name it, but your body knew. Your soul responded. Some people speak volumes without saying a word. They don't arrive with noise or flash or grand entrances. But the moment they enter, something inside you becomes still, like the whole room just took a breath. She doesn't draw attention, but your attention gently leans toward her. She doesn't perform, but her energy performs a quiet symphony only your deeper self can hear. This kind of presence can't be taught, can't be trained. It's not about appearance, not about charm. It's something else entirely. It's an inner alignment, an authentic silent knowing that vibrates on a frequency only souls can recognize. Carl Jung said, "The soul does not hear with ears, does not see with eyes. It senses through frequency. And that frequency, that quiet signal of wholeness, can't be faked." We live in a world where being noticed feels like a survival skill, where volume, visibility, and validation have become currency. And yet, there she is. Not louder, not brighter, just real. And because she's real, she becomes unforgettable. It's not what she wears, not how she moves, not even what she says. It's her energy. It doesn't ask to be received, it simply is. She doesn't try to dominate the space, but somehow the space reorients around her. Not because she's the center of attention, but because she's the center of herself. If you've ever been in the same room with someone like this, you know exactly what I mean. You might have glanced toward her more than once, not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper. A quiet pull that doesn't make sense, but feels true. You don't feel seduced. You feel moved. Moved toward your own truth. Moved into presence. Moved into something forgotten. Because energy like that doesn't distract. It awakens. And sometimes it awakens something in us we didn't even know was asleep. So what is this mysterious presence? It's not magic. It's not mystery. It's what happens when a woman stops trying to be seen and simply allows herself to be. When she stops operating from need and starts moving from knowing. Knowing who she is. Knowing she's enough. Knowing her value doesn't depend on being seen. And that knowing becomes a vibration. A frequency that does what words never could. It reaches others on a soul level, not through logic, not through performance, but through something older, more ancient, more honest. So let me ask you, have you ever felt invisible no matter how hard you tried to be noticed? Have you ever dressed a certain way, spoken a certain way, curated a version of yourself just to feel chosen, and yet the most magnetic people you've met weren't even trying, were they? They were just being, fully, quietly, unapologetically. What if you didn't have to chase attention anymore? What if all you needed was to return to yourself? Because when you stop needing the world to see you, your energy becomes impossible to ignore. The soul doesn't respond to performance. It responds to truth. And when a woman lives in that truth, she doesn't need to speak loudly to be heard. She becomes felt. So if you've ever met someone like that or you're becoming her, leave a comment below. What does your energy say when your mouth is silent? What parts of you are ready to stop performing and start returning? And if something in you stirred while listening to this, don't let it pass quietly. You didn't hear this by accident. You're remembering something you were never meant to forget. What if the very moment you stopped chasing love was the moment you became magnetic? What if being chosen was never the goal? What if the only thing that mattered was remembering that you've already chosen yourself? There's something unshakably powerful about a woman who no longer waits to be picked. She's not waiting for the right man, or the dream job, or some outside sign to declare her worthy. She's already done that for herself. She looked inward, into the quiet, into the raw, into the unedited. And there she whispered, "I choose you," to her own soul. And from that moment on, something shifted. She didn't need to be more beautiful, more sweet, more impressive, because she stopped trading pieces of herself in exchange for belonging. Her beauty isn't in perfection, it's in presence. She's grounded, rooted, whole, and that wholeness creates gravity. She doesn't try to pull you in, but you feel drawn anyway. Not because she demands attention, but because she radiates integrity. Not the moral kind, the energetic kind. She is integrated, nothing fractured, nothing leaking. She doesn't seek completion, she's already full. And here's the paradox. A man might meet dozens of kind, brilliant, beautiful women, but there's something different about her. He can't explain it, but he feels it. She doesn't flatter, she doesn't perform, she doesn't adapt to be lovable. She just is. And that unapologetic presence awakens something ancient in him. He might resist it, he might not understand it, but deep down, he knows. This woman doesn't need me to save her. She doesn't need me to fill a void. She's already whole. And that makes me want to rise. I remember meeting a woman like that. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to charm. In fact, she didn't even seem concerned with being liked. And yet, I couldn't forget her. There was no need in her energy. No subtle pull for validation, just peace, real, grounded peace. And somehow, it was contagious. It made me realize the most unforgettable people are those who have already come home to themselves. So let me ask you, are you still waiting to be chosen? Still editing yourself in subtle ways, holding your breath in conversations, changing your tone, silencing your truth to be enough? What if you stopped? What if, instead of dimming your light for others to see you, you let it shine fully and trusted that the right soul would recognize it instantly? Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And maybe, just maybe, that's the only shift that ever really mattered. Stop scanning the room for approval. Stop seeking your reflection in someone else's eyes. Turn inward. Stand in front of your own soul and dare to say, "I see you. I love you. I choose you." Because when you do, everything changes. You stop attracting people who love your mask and start becoming magnetic to those who can meet you, soul to soul. You don't need to be sweeter, quieter, more anything. You just need to be true. So here's your invitation. Leave a comment and tell me, what would shift if you stopped waiting to be chosen and simply chose yourself? Subscribe if this spoke to something inside you, because that part of you, the one who's ready, has been waiting to come home. Have you ever heard a man say, "I don't know why I love her, but I just can't walk away"? That's not confusion. That's not obsession. That's his soul, remembering something he didn't even know he'd forgotten. Carl Jung called it anima, the feminine presence buried deep within the unconscious of every man. not a fantasy, not a stereotype, but a forgotten energy made of emotion, of intuition, of tenderness, of soft, sacred vulnerability. Most men are taught to suppress these things, to harden, to protect, to stay one step ahead of feeling, to perform masculinity, to avoid collapse. And yet, he meets a woman who doesn't perform, who doesn't shrink, who doesn't decorate herself for his comfort. And something in him cracks open, not because she's trying, but because she is true. And truth has a frequency the soul cannot ignore. She doesn't push, she doesn't pull, she just is. And in being fully herself, unfiltered, grounded, raw, she becomes a mirror, a reflection of the part of him he has never dared to meet. She doesn't flatter his ego. She awakens his soul. He doesn't love her for being perfect. He loves her because she makes him feel whole again. Not through words, not through effort, but through resonance. She reflects his forgotten self. Here's the truth. He's not just seeing her. He's seeing himself, the part that still longs, still believes, still feels deeply, the part that's tired of armor, that wants to breathe, that remembers softness, but hasn't felt safe enough to return to it. And when her energy is real, not manipulative, not curated, something sacred unlocks. She doesn't give him something to chase. She gives him something to remember. That he has a soul, too. That beneath the layers he was taught to wear, there lives a man who can feel, who can soften, who can simply be. Think of the man who's always in control, charming, sharp, unshakable. And then he meets her. She doesn't challenge his mind. She touches his essence. And suddenly, he's not performing. He's feeling. He might say, she's not like anyone I've ever met. But what he really means is, she makes me feel like I've met myself for the first time. So, when a man says, I don't know why I love her, I just do. That's not weakness. That's soul recognition. It's his soul responding to a frequency that isn't loud, but deeply familiar. It's not lust, not logic. It's something ancient coming alive through her presence. So, what does this mean for you? It means your power was never in how perfect you looked, how polite you sounded, how lovable you tried to be. Your power has always been in how true you were willing to become. Because when you stop performing, when you drop the mask, when you show up as your unedited self, you become a mirror no soul can look away from. Anima isn't about being feminine on the outside. It's about awakening what's been repressed on the inside. And when you live in your fullness, in your truth, your depth, your vulnerability, you offer something a man never knew he needed. A space to come home to himself. You remind him he doesn't have to earn love with power or perfection. He can simply feel, simply soften, simply be. So if you've ever wondered why someone was drawn to you without knowing why, maybe now you know. It wasn't your face, it wasn't your voice, it was the soul in you that stirred the soul in him. Leave a comment below. Have you ever loved someone without knowing why, only that you couldn't walk away? Or maybe you were the woman he couldn't forget, because your presence called him back to himself. There's something different about a woman who no longer needs love to feel worthy. She doesn't chase it, she becomes it. And that's why you can't forget her. There's a message. You don't hear it, you feel it. A silent ache, a quiet pull, that whisper in someone's energy. Please choose me, please fill me. No words are needed, but it's there, and we feel it. A woman can be stunning, sharp, charming. But if she carries emptiness inside, it's louder than anything she says. That silent hunger. It doesn't bring people closer. It pushes them away. Not because they don't care, but because they can feel she's asking for a love that isn't theirs to give. She's reaching for something only she can give herself. But one day, she changes. She stops reaching outward and starts breathing from within. She begins living from wholeness, from confidence, from communion with herself, not comparison with others. She doesn't walk in hoping to be seen. She walks in already noticing herself. And when she meets someone, she doesn't ask, "Does he like me?" She asks, "How do I feel in his presence? Safe, open, alive." That's the shift. She's not trying to be loved. She knows she is love, and men, they feel it too, even if they can't explain it. One woman walks in with all the right moves, but her energy says, "Let me be enough for you." Another enters quietly, but she radiates wholeness. Her presence says, "You don't need to complete me. I've already arrived full." And that is what draws a man in. Not because she needs him, but because being near her awakens something in him he forgot he had. Let's be honest, need is heavy, even when it wears a smile. We've all felt it, that ache, that hope someone could fill the empty place inside. And maybe it worked for a while, but it never lasts. Because the only love that stays is the one you give yourself first. When you become the source of what you used to chase, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing. You start attracting. Not just attention, but truth, connection, resonance. A woman who is full doesn't need to be rescued. She's not waiting for someone to complete her story. She's already living it. And that is what makes her magnetic. Not because she asks for anything, but because her presence says, "I'm not here to be saved. I'm here to meet you." And to the right man, that kind of presence is unforgettable. Not because she's perfect, but because her truth is undeniable. So let me ask you, have you been entering relationships from hunger or from wholeness? Have you been hoping someone could prove you are enough? What if you stopped? What if you poured all that energy into becoming the one who no longer needs to be chosen? Because here's the truth. When you stop chasing love, you become the place it longs to land. You don't need to be sweeter. You don't need to shrink. You don't need to prove your worth to fit someone else's story of love. You only need to remember who you are beneath the need to be seen. Drop a comment and share, what would your life look like if you stopped seeking love and started living as love? What if the part of you you've been hiding is the part that makes you unforgettable, not your sweetness, not your smile, but your unedited truth, the fire, the longing, the ache, the parts you once thought made you too much? That's not your weakness. That's your magnetism. From the time she was a little girl, she was told to be polite, to sit still, to smile sweetly. Don't raise your voice. Don't take up space. Don't be angry. Don't be loud. Don't be messy. So she tucked away her rage, silenced her desire, swallowed her grief. She learned how to be agreeable, pleasant, easy to love. But being easy to love is not the same as being seen. And eventually, something inside her began to ache. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Maybe that's where everything begins. Not in becoming better, but in becoming honest. Because pretending to always be okay isn't strength, it's fear, dressed as grace, real, feminine power. It doesn't come from never falling apart. It comes from letting every part of you live. Her anger, her grief, her fire, her longing, her tears, all of it. You see, the world doesn't know what to do with a woman who is fully expressed. She challenges comfort. She confronts illusions. She forces people to feel, and yet she's the one they carry in their bones, even if they never understood why. Because she doesn't hide her darkness. She holds it. She doesn't bury her wounds. She brings them to the light and says, "This is me, and I am not broken." And when a man meets her, he may feel overwhelmed. Not because she's too much, but because she's real. And realness is rare. She doesn't demand to be loved. But her energy says, if you stay, it has to be with all of me. Not just the pretty parts. That's the offering. A love that's not a performance, but a presence. I once sat across from a woman like that. She didn't try to impress me. She didn't need to. In fact, she said, "Some days I feel like I'm falling apart. Other days I feel like fire." And in that moment, I felt relief. Because finally, someone wasn't selling me a mask. She was inviting me into something real. And in her rawness, I felt more seen than I ever had with someone who tried to be perfect. You don't need to be polished to be powerful. You don't need to be easy to love to be worthy of love. The most unforgettable women aren't the ones who made everyone comfortable. They are the ones who stood tall in the full spectrum of who they are and said, "I will not cut off any part of myself to fit your picture." She's not here to make everyone feel safe. She's here to be free. And freedom draws others into their own. So if you've been hiding your fire, your edge, your grief, your truth, this is your invitation. Stop apologizing for being whole. Stop shrinking. Stop smoothing the edges of your intensity, because the love you're searching for won't come through being digestible. It will come when you let yourself be seen as you are. Let the world keep its expectations. You return to your essence. Your darkness is not a burden. It's a doorway. Leave a comment below. What part of you have you been hiding that you're finally ready to welcome home? There comes a moment, quiet, but irreversible, when a woman stops asking, "Will you choose me?" and instead she whispers to the world, "I've already chosen myself." That is the moment she becomes unforgettable, because something deep shifts when a woman no longer lives to be picked. She's not seeking approval. She's not waiting for someone to notice her light before she dares to shine. She doesn't audition anymore. She arrives, not as a performance, not as a filtered version, but as her whole, honest self, imperfect, unedited, fully embodied. And in that return to center, she unlocks a quiet kind of power, the power to live as a frequency. Her energy no longer asks, "Am I enough?" It simply says, "This is who I am." And that message, though silent, echoes like a song. Only the right souls can hear. She doesn't chase. She doesn't perform. She doesn't cling. But still, no one can ignore her, because she becomes presence, a vibration, a tuning fork of truth. And just like certain frequencies repel what's not aligned, her energy begins to do the same. Not through effort, through essence. Picture her entering a room. She's not trying to stand out, but you can't look away. She doesn't seek attention. She owns her space. She doesn't force connection. Her field simply filters who stays. She's not scanning the room wondering who's right for her. Her energy already knows. It draws some people in and gently lets others go, all without a single word, because real alignment never begs, never convinces. Carl Jung once said, "When the ego is no longer the center, we begin to become ourselves." Maybe that's what's happening here. She no longer needs praise, applause, or validation. Her ego steps aside and her deeper self begins to lead. It's not arrogance, it's not detachment, it's rootedness. She knows who she is, and she's done hiding it. Her center becomes her compass. And from that center, she doesn't ask, "Will you choose me?" She simply lives in a state that says, if you're meant for this frequency, you'll feel it before you understand it. I once sat in a crowded room with a woman who barely spoke, and yet I couldn't stop noticing her. Not for what she wore, not for how she looked, but because of what she didn't try to do. She wasn't positioning, she wasn't performing, she was just present. And in that stillness, she felt unshakable, not loud, not forceful, just deeply known. As if she belonged to herself in a way most people have forgotten how to. So let me ask you this. What would happen if you stopped trying to be chosen? What would rise in you? If you trusted that who you already are, without editing, without pleasing, was enough to magnetize the life meant for you? What if, just for today, you stopped dimming your light to match the room and let the room adjust to you? Because when you stop reaching outward and start anchoring inward, you don't just get seen, you get felt. You become a field of truth that speaks louder than charm and lasts longer than attention. Leave a comment. What would change in your life? If you no longer needed to be chosen, what would become possible? If you lived as a frequency instead of a question, she isn't soft because someone told her to be. She's soft because she stopped fighting herself. And that changes everything. Because real femininity doesn't come from being nice. It comes from walking through the fire and choosing to stay open. Here's the truth. Most people never say. The softest women are often the ones who've been through the most. But instead of hardening, they chose something braver. They let the storm soften the parts that were never meant to carry so much weight. She's not soft because life was easy. She's soft because she finally stopped resisting who she really is. And that surrender, it's not weakness, it's power. The kind of power that lives in the space between words, in eyes that no longer need to explain themselves. When she walks into a room, you might not notice her at first, but somehow, everything shifts. You feel calm, you stop performing, you stop proving, you feel safe, and strangely, you feel more like you. Why? Because her energy gives you permission to stop pretending too. Around her, you don't have to be on. You don't have to fix. You don't have to impress. She's not waiting to be rescued. She already rescued herself. And that's why, for the first time in a long time, your nervous system relaxes. You feel your guard drop. You remember what it's like to be raw, real, received. Because she isn't asking you to become anything except maybe a little more honest. It's not being passive. It's not playing small. And it's definitely not pretending to be soft just to avoid being too much. Awakened femininity is a balance between stillness and wildness, without apology. It's the knowing that you can hold space without losing yourself. It's standing in grace without needing control. It's the kind of energy that doesn't beg, doesn't cling, doesn't chase. It invites, it holds, It feels like home. I once knew a woman who never raised her voice. But when she spoke, the whole room leaned in. She didn't try to command attention. She didn't chase it. The room adjusted to her frequency. Why, it wasn't charm. It wasn't perfection. It was depth, that silent weight of someone who has faced herself in the dark and still chosen to stay open. She didn't try to be gentle. She simply was, and that was more magnetic than any performance I've ever seen. So let me ask you, have you been trying to be soft because the world told you it makes you lovable? Or are you ready to become soft because you've stopped fighting your truth? There's a difference. And the second one, that will change your life. Because the woman who's made peace with both her fire and her stillness, who no longer edits herself to be more palatable, becomes a kind of gravity. She doesn't just attract people, she makes them feel safe to be real too. True softness isn't about shrinking, it's about opening. It's about becoming so rooted in your own being that gentleness flows from you like breath. Not because you're performing, but because you're no longer afraid. Leave a comment and share. What part of your softness once felt unsafe to show, and what might happen if you let it rise again, not as weakness, but as wisdom? And if this stirred something in you, subscribe. Because the world has enough masks. What we need now are women who've walked through their chaos and emerged still, with open hearts and unshakable peace. Not soft to be loved, but soft because they finally are. The moment you stop needing love is the moment your love becomes irresistible, not because you beg to be chosen, but because you finally chose yourself. There's a kind of love that doesn't chase, that doesn't cling, that doesn't perform. It flows, quietly, powerfully, from someone who no longer needs love to feel whole. This kind of love doesn't beg to be returned, doesn't fear rejection, doesn't whisper, "Please complete me," because it wasn't born from lack. It was born from abundance. You've seen it before. That woman who walks into love not out of fear of being alone, but from the overflow of who she is. She gives not to earn her place, but because her soul is already full. She doesn't ask for permission to feel. She doesn't trade emotion for attention. She loves freely because she's no longer loving from hunger. She's loving from home. And that energy, it's magnetic. A man near her, he doesn't feel pressure to rescue. He doesn't feel like he's holding up her world. He simply feels safe, seen, invited. Not because she needs him, but because her love is clean. No desperation, no demand, no dependency, just peace. When love is no longer your pursuit, but your presence, everything shifts. You stop whispering, "Am I enough?" and begin to radiate, "I am." You stop performing for love and start embodying it. You no longer wait to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. And that is where the magnetism begins. You don't chase love. You become the space where love finds you. I once met a woman like that. She didn't try to impress me. She didn't reach for my gaze. She wasn't selling her story. She just sat calm, grounded, whole. And I didn't feel pulled. I felt invited, as if her love wasn't something I had to earn, but something she already held with or without me. That kind of peace, unforgettable, because it doesn't shout, it reminds. Ask yourself, are you loving to feel worthy, or are you loving because you already are? Are you giving to be filled, or are you giving from overflow? There's no shame in loving from lack. We've all done it. But there is power in deciding to return home to the part of you that no longer waits to be filled. Love isn't something you chase. It isn't something you wait for. It's not something anyone else defines. Because the truest love was never out there. It's been you, all along. And when you finally remember that you stop searching, you start radiating. Wherever you go, whoever you meet, you don't find love, you become it. You don't wait to be chosen. You choose yourself, your wholeness, your peace. Comment below, what would shift in your life if love was no longer something you needed, but something you became? There comes a moment, quiet, but irreversible, when a woman stops asking, "Will you choose me?" and instead, she whispers to the world, "I have already chosen myself." That moment, that's when she becomes unforgettable, because something shifts deeply, quietly, when she no longer lives to be picked. No more chasing approval, no more shrinking for acceptance, no more waiting for someone to see her light before she allows it to shine. She doesn't audition anymore. She arrives, not as a role, not as a version of who she thinks she should be, but as her raw, whole, imperfect, real. And in that return to her center, she unlocks something rare, the power to live as a frequency. Her energy no longer asks, "Am I enough?" It simply says, "This is who I am." And though silent, that message echoes like a sacred song. Only the right souls can hear it. She doesn't chase, she doesn't perform, she doesn't cling, and yet, no one can ignore her. Because she becomes presence, a field, a vibration, a tuning fork of truth. And like all true frequencies, hers does the sorting for her. She doesn't have to repel what's not aligned. It simply falls away, not through force, but by nature. Picture this, a crowded room, someone standing in stillness, not trying to be seen, but impossible to miss. She doesn't grab attention. She owns space. She doesn't scan the room asking, "Who's right for me?" Her energy does that for her, automatically. It draws in the right ones and gently releases the rest. No explanation needed, no strategy required, because true alignment never begs, never convinces. As Carl Jung once wrote, when the ego is no longer the center, we begin to become ourselves. And maybe this is what that means. When a woman no longer needs to be chosen to feel secure, her ego steps back. Her truth steps forward. It's not arrogance. It's not apathy. It's rootedness. She knows who she is, and she no longer fears being her. Her stillness becomes her compass, and from that center, she no longer asks, "Will you choose me?" She lives in a quiet knowing. If you're meant for this frequency, you'll feel it before you understand it. I once met a woman like that. She barely spoke in a room full of people, but I couldn't look away. Not because of her looks, not because of charm, but because of what she didn't try to do. She wasn't performing. She wasn't positioning. She was simply present. And in that presence, she felt solid, unshakable, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply known, as if she belonged to herself in a way most people never dare to. So I ask you, what would rise in you if you stopped trying to be chosen? What power would awaken if you let go of being enough and returned to who you've always been? What if you stopped adjusting your light to match the room and let the room adjust to you? Because when you stop reaching outward and begin anchoring inward, you don't just become seen, you become felt. You become a resonance, a field, a truth that speaks louder than charm and lasts longer than attention. Drop a comment below. What would change in your life if you no longer needed to be chosen? And what becomes possible when you finally live as a frequency instead of a question? Stop asking how to be loved. Start becoming the frequency of love. Because the moment you do, you stop chasing, and you start attracting what already belongs to your soul. Real love doesn't show up because you perfected yourself. It doesn't knock on your door when you've earned enough worth, said all the right things, or polished every wound until it shines. No. Real love, the kind that anchors you, stirs you, expands you, arrives when your soul recognizes something ancient in another and says, yes, that's familiar. It's never been about charm or logic or how lovable you appear on paper. People don't fall for perfection. They fall when your energy touches something in them they didn't even know was waiting. You were never meant to be just the right one on someone else's checklist. You were meant to become so anchored in your truth, so whole in your being, that love stops feeling like a transaction and starts feeling like a return. A remembrance. Because when you choose yourself, when you let your light and your shadow dance in the same breath, you become unshakable. Not loud, not flashy, but deeply, undeniably real. So here's the invitation. Take off the mask. Not because you've mastered self-love, but because the most radiant parts of you were never the polished ones. They were the honest ones, the raw ones, the ones that didn't fit inside the box. You don't need to soften your truth so someone else can stay comfortable. You don't need to shrink to be lovable. You don't need to perform to feel worthy. You only need to remember who you are beneath the noise, beneath the need to please, beneath the fear of not being enough. And from that place, you won't need to ask how to be loved. You'll be living as love. And if something stirred inside you while hearing this, not the part of you the world trained, but the part you've kept hidden, the part you've always known was real, even before it had words, then maybe this wasn't just a video. Maybe it was a signal, a quiet nudge, a whisper from your soul saying, it's time. Time to stop adjusting. Time to stop reaching. Time to stop shrinking just to fit places you've already outgrown, and instead, to come home, to breathe from your center, to give from overflow, not hunger, to live without apology. Because when you stop chasing, you don't fade, you radiate. The kind of love you're looking for. It doesn't show up because you begged louder. It shows up when your silence becomes sacred. So before you go, a moment of truth. Where are you in your journey back to yourself? What mask are you still wearing to feel lovable? What might shift if you lived as a frequency, not a question? Drop your truth in the comments, not the polished version, the real one. Because someone out there is still searching for their reflection in your courage. And if you're done performing for love and ready to remember who you were before the world told you to be anything else, subscribe, not to learn how to win love, but to finally remember you already are love, and you always have been. You don't need to do more to be enough. You only need to become still enough to feel yourself again, because the one who's meant for you won't come because you reached for them. They'll come because your truth called them home. So, stop knocking on the wrong doors. Start vibrating in your truth. And let the ones who are meant to find you finally arrive.